Hi, I'm Kesenya, and thank you so much for joining me for this series looking at Jupiter's transits through each house of the horoscope. It is lovely to have you with me. I especially want to welcome all the people who are viewing this who are new to astrology. I hope this video helps you learn more and understand more about how astrology operates and the effects of astrology in your life. And also welcome back to those of us who are a little bit more seasoned in our knowledge of astrology. It's a pleasure to have you here as well. Hopefully, if you are more seasoned in astrology, you'll be able to help out those who leave comments in the comments section looking for answers and asking questions. So thank you for helping and supporting me in that endeavor, and to help make this a beautiful community where we can communicate and uplift one another on our journey to know more about astrology. So we're going to be looking at Jupiter transiting through the houses. But first, let's look at a little bit about Jupiter itself as a planet. There's so much to know about Jupiter. What a fantastic planet, and it's such a joy and a thrill and a delight to be talking about Jupiter, stepping into Jupiter energy, because he is known as, in astrology, the great benefic, bringing benefit, bringing expansion, bringing growth, bringing abundance into our lives wherever he sits in the chart, in the natal chart. But as I said, in this instance, we're looking at transits and the benevolence that he brings, where that's going to be felt and experienced more according to transits. But let's start by looking at Jupiter. Well, Jupiter is a magnetizer. If you think about Jupiter out there in the actual outer space, Jupiter energy draws things in. It's got this massive magnetic field for a start, and it also it attracts objects around it into its gravitational pull. So it's this massive planet, and it is quite literally a magnetizer, draws things to it out there in space, and the same energy is represented by Jupiter in astrology as well. So when it transits a house or a sign, and we're using whole sign astrology with this, where each sign represents a house, it will draw things to it of the nature of that sign or that house. It will magnetize those things, pull those things in, and make them manifest more in the life of the individual. And the life of the collective as well, I might add too. As I said, Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system, and it is therefore very effectual. Jupiter very nearly became a second sun in the formation of our solar system millions of years ago, and would have entered into therefore a binary system with our actual sun, or maybe one of them might have gobbled the other up, who knows, but Jupiter didn't quite get there. It didn't quite have the oomph that it took. But nonetheless, Jupiter is massive, and he functions very much in the nature of a benevolent sun in our chart, bringing confidence and bringing illumination to things. And because of his mass, his energy, his energetic output, as I said, he has this monstrous magnetosphere that reaches out into the zone of Saturn, actually. It crosses into Saturn's orbit. And because of this influence of Jupiter that is so expansive, quite literally in the skies and figuratively in astrology as well, the effects of Jupiter are far-reaching and very, very influential. Jupiter is expansive in astrology, as goes with the idea and the nature of as above, so below, and him being the biggest planet, the most expansive planet, his energy in our lives is very expansive as well. In fact, he is so big that you could fit 1,300 Earth-size balls inside of Jupiter. 1,300. It's a phenomenal thought, difficult to get our head around, really. Not only that, you could actually fit every single other planet in the solar system into Jupiter all at once. Go figure, he's enormous. So he brings expansion with his transits and with his natal placement as well. He brings abundance as well. He brings enthusiasm. He brings opportunities. He brings, as I said before, confidence. He brings also a sense of morality to an area of our life, wherever he's transiting. He brings a need for ethics to wherever he's transiting. And he brings a sense of adventure and, what could I experience now? What can this do for me? How can I utilize this? What can I learn about this? He brings that energy to the area of the chart that he's transiting as well. Jupiter rules being charitable, generosity, giving, and he will bring this character of benevolence into whatever area of your chart that he happens to be transiting. You will feel more benevolent, more charitable and feel like giving to that area of your life in greater capacity. Jupiter is also very forward-looking. And so his transit to a certain area of our house will give us more of a forward-looking approach to the themes of that house. He allows us, he's actually a planet that connects to prophecy, and he allows us to gain a glimpse of the potential, of the future possibilities of a house. He gives us the chance to extend and expand beyond our current limits in a certain area or realm of life that is connected to the house in which he's transiting. One of my favorite mantras that I use frequently is I expand to meet my destiny. This is my mantra when I practice yoga and do all sorts of other things in life, and I remind myself I can expand and become big enough to embrace the destiny that the universe has for me, the highest vibrational good that is represented in my chart. So if you're feeling limited or blocked in a certain area, certain realm of life, just wait till Jupiter gets to that section of your chart and watch the blossoming occur. Watch yourself expand beyond the limits you perceived that were around you. The blockages, the restrictions in a certain area can be absolutely sort of pushed out. The boundaries are expanded for you to experience more blessing, more abundance, more prosperity in a certain area. How this works is that Jupiter has a connection to our visioning processes, our dreaming. Like Jupiter in ancient astrology rules the sign of Pisces, and Pisces is all about our dreams and daydreams, night dreams, all that sort of thing. So Jupiter has a connection to the governance of our visioning, of our dreams, of our imagination, and our intuition. So it's our intuition and our imaginative visioning processes when we sit on the couch on a nice spring afternoon with a cup of, Earl Grey tea, and we're looking out the window dreaming about what we'd like our life to look like, who we want to be, how we'd really like it to work out for us. That begins the process of expansion. Because it's in those processes of trusting our intuition and tapping into our imagination and our visioning, processes that we begin a shift of energy within us. And that's when the old Hermetic principle of as within, so without starts to work for us. When we change our inner being, then we start to see external circumstances change to reflect that shift in energy within us. And Jupiter does his work on that inner level. He is also an externally manifesting planet, but he begins by working on this inner level, creating a higher vibration for us through allowing us to feel more abundance, more joy, more optimism, more joviality. The word jovial comes from the word Jupiter, actually. And it's through this inner change in our levels of optimism and abundance consciousness that then we begin to see the manifestation happen in reality. And we start to see our outer circumstances change. And Jupiter begins that process when he transits a house, by lifting our vibrational level in our inner world to be able to receive on the outer world. Now, Jupiter is named after the ancient Roman god, king of the gods actually, in mythology. And there's an association with Thor in Norse mythology. There's an association with Zeus in Greek mythology. And there's an association with Marduk in the ancient Babylonian mythology as well. So that he has links to all those energies of being the supreme god or governor over all, or the one top authority, top dog, so to speak. And because of that, he actually rules in astrology lawmakers, judges, legal systems, higher levels of knowledge, places of learning that are of that higher level, universities and colleges. He also governs things like religion and belief systems, long distance travels, not just short little trips, but the big, we're talking Jupiter, his big travels overseas or to other, countries that are far away. He governs other cultural practices and other cultural beliefs. Like Jupiter represents other cultures in general. And he also is a representation of higher knowledge from the divine realms. And it's this that makes him the Lord of intuition, the angel on our shoulder giving us wisdom and guidance in our journey, the guru as he's known in Vedic astrology. Jupiter is referred to as guru, and there's a very good reason for that, because he gives this wisdom, he gives this knowledge. He is the wise, angel on our shoulder. Now, this is a spring series that I am preparing. It's spring in Australia when I'm launching this series. If you're watching it at different times of the year, it'll be a different season, obviously. But in Australia, it is spring at the moment, which I thought was a perfect time to be doing a series on Jupiter and his transits, because spring is about growth. Spring is about the expansion, the blossoming, and very much the abundant nature of Jupiter represented in spring. But Jupiter actually rules the colors purple and orange. And as you can see, I'm wearing a purple cardigan with my spring attire here. And there's purple flowers all over my dress. Also, if you look behind me, I've decorated part of my house with a lot of purple and orange. There's an orange door there and a purple painting and so on, because I really want to channel the energy of Jupiter in my home. I myself am a very highly Jupiterian person. And so I really want to bring that energy in. And Jupiter governs these things. Jupiter rules the crystals lapis lazuli and malachite, according to the research that I have done. There's some varying opinions around that, but this is malachite. I don't have any lapis lazuli on me at the moment, but I will be getting more. Lapis lazuli was often used, and possibly malachite as well, in ancient Egyptian jewelry and tomb decorations. And so it was attributed to the pharaohs, or not attributed to the pharaohs, but it had connections to this leadership element in ancient Egypt. It was only the wealthy, only the prosperous, only the pharaohs and their families that were able to enjoy the luxuries of lapis lazuli and malachite. And of course, Jupiter has these associations with abundance and with wealth and with the lawgivers and leaders. Jupiter's day is Thursday. Now, those of you who are familiar with how the days of the week got their names will know that it comes from the Norse Thor's day. And we've already said Jupiter has an affiliation with Thor. Jupiter's day that he rules of the week is Thursday, Thor's day. Now, because of all these wonderful things that Jupiter governs, and we're going to talk about a few more of those in just a minute, but because he rules abundance, because he rules wealth, because he rules a certain type of leadership, that inspirational figure, that lawmaker, that religious leader, that spiritual leader, that divinely inspired leader, because Jupiter rules these things, wherever Jupiter sits in your chart is where you're going to be able to channel and receive more abundance, more wealth, more opportunity, more good fortune, more prosperity. All these things that Jupiter rules will come into the house where your Jupiter sits in the natal chart. But that's a series for another day when we look at Jupiter through the houses in the natal chart. We're looking at transiting Jupiter in this series. So a bit more about the things that Jupiter rules. Let me read this list to you. He rules children, he rules wealth, he rules belief systems, he rules the blood, he rules the veins, he also rules the hips, and the ability to move forward in life is obviously connected to our ability to utilize our hips. So Jupiter also governs our capacity and our ability to move forward in life as well. Jupiter rules everything from sort of accommodation of a very high level, or public buildings of a very high level, universities, but things like castles, cathedrals, casinos are all ruled by Jupiter. And not that casinos are of a high level, but there is the element of luck and wealth and prosperity that's sort of associated with casinos that gives Jupiter the rulership of casinos. But the belief systems around cathedrals and ashrams and the buildings that govern our belief systems, or that connect with our belief systems, Jupiter rules those, as well as the high level places where we reside, castles and estates and things like that of a very high nature, high caliber. He rules etiquette, he rules manners. In a woman's chart, Jupiter rules husbands, and generally he rules beautiful things like joy and happiness. If we want to know where we can feel the most joy and happiness in life, look to where your Jupiter sits in your natal chart or where Jupiter's transiting. You know you'll be able to generate more joy in that area, more happiness. Jupiter rules devotion, being devoted to something or someone. At a perhaps not so pleasant level, Jupiter rules obesity. He is, after all, the largest planet in the solar system. He's big. And if you have Jupiter placed in the first house, he can usually, in the natal chart, he can make you taller than average, but you've got to watch your weight in later age because you can tend to spread out and become very Jupiter-like in the way you look, very round in the middle. In fact, Jupiter as a planet bulges in the middle due to his rotation speed and gravitational pull and all that sort of thing that affects the shape of Jupiter, and he bulges out in the middle. So when we have Jupiter in the first house, we do have to be very careful of bulging out in the middle at some point in life. Hence, I have to watch what I eat. So Jupiter rules beautiful things as well, like benevolence, philanthropy, get my words out, and prayer. So these are glorious things that Jupiter rules. And these are only a few of the areas of life that you might notice Jupiter influencing through his transits or through your natal chart placement as well. There's just masses of things, as is befitting to the nature of a very big planet. There's a very big list of things that Jupiter governs in our lives, but there's just a few. Now, Jupiter is at his most powerful in fire and water signs. So when he's in the earth signs or the air signs, it's not that he doesn't bring, beneficial results. He's just a little bit lackluster. He doesn't have the oomph. He doesn't have the, ta-da kind of capacity that he would in water or fire signs. He's just a little bit ta-da, The energy is not quite the same, not quite as full. He is especially strong in Sagittarius, which he rules, Pisces, which is the other sign that he rules in traditional astrology, ancient astrology, and he is especially strong where he is exalted in the sign of Cancer. So if you are experiencing a transit of Jupiter to Pisces, Sagittarius, or Cancer at some time in life, then you're going to experience more of his benevolence in a very ta-da kind of way because of the strength of Jupiter in these signs. Jupiter has a natural affiliation with the ninth house, the most the most lucky house in astrology, the most blessed house in astrology, the ninth house, and Jupiter has a natural affiliation to that house. He also has a natural affiliation to the 12th house, which is, interestingly enough, one of the malefic houses in Vedic astrology. But Jupiter has an affiliation to that because of his governance of the sign Pisces, which has all this 12th house energy. So Jupiter is very comfortable when he's in the 12th house or the 9th house. But Jupiter is actually has his strongest directional strength and greatest effect in either the first house, particularly the first house. That's where Jupiter has his greatest directional strength or gives the strongest influence for good. But there is also a strong influence of Jupiter when he's in the 10th house. This is where Jupiter does his best work, in the first house or the 10th house. So if you're experiencing that by transit as well, you're going to experience a lot more of the blessing, especially if you happen to have Sagittarius, Pisces, or Cancer as your first or 10th house and Jupiter's transiting there. Hang on to your hats, it's going to be fun. Now, wherever Jupiter is transiting is where you can actually contribute most to society. And this is because Jupiter is charitable, Jupiter is generous, Jupiter is a philanthropist, Jupiter is a benefic, he brings benefit. So you yourself can be these energies or give these energies to the world and your role on the planet. So, Jupiter might be transiting, for example, the 5th house. So you can give your benefit, your charity, your philanthropy to children, because that is where the energy is of benevolence and generosity is being directed by transit. Also consider that in your natal placement of Jupiter as well, where you can be the most generous and give, in a very benevolent, philanthropic way, wherever Jupiter sits in your natal chart also. So without further ado, let's go in now and have a look at where Jupiter is transiting and how it might affect you. So how do we find when Jupiter is transiting through the 9th house? Well, firstly, we need to know where Jupiter currently is, in what sign, and we're using whole sign astrology here. So you could go to a site like planetwatcher.com or astro.com. And look for the chart of the moment at astro.com. And either of these will usually be able to then show you in which sign Jupiter is currently transiting. Now, as I am recording this particular video, Jupiter is in the sign of Capricorn. So we're looking at that as the whole sign placement for Jupiter right now. Now, because we're looking for the 9th house, we would want to then see Capricorn falling as the 9th house in astrology. And that would mean that Taurus is the rising sign where we're counting from in this example. So as you can see, Taurus there is the rising sign with the arrow. It is house 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 9 would be where Jupiter is currently transiting. But of course, if you're looking at this a few years down the track and Jupiter's in a different sign, then you'll need to, let's say Jupiter was in Pisces, you'll need to count all the way to Pisces, and that will tell you, in this case, Jupiter is in the 11th house if you're a Taurus rising person. So really, first place of call is to find out what sign Jupiter is currently transiting and see where that corresponds in your chart, and then find the video to match that, and you'll know what transit then that you're experiencing. When Jupiter transits the 9th house, we tend to feel a bit of an expansion of the usual boundaries of life. Things get a bit bigger for us, philosophically, internally, as well as externally. Our spiritual boundaries go way out. Suddenly we're more open to spiritual experience, spiritual practice, spiritual beliefs that we may never have explored before, and we might discover a lot about different ways of practicing spirituality that expand our horizons. Our physical experiences can also be expanded too, and any physical experience that leads to a moment or a period of enlightenment is also seen through this particular house. It's a house of adventure. And when we have an adventure, usually our soul and our mind and our philosophical worldview is expanded as well. And so Jupiter transiting through the 9th house brings that afresh into our lives also. So we become very interested in new beliefs and new spiritual practices. Sometimes we might travel to experience more of those things. We might go for a trip to an ashram in India, or we might spend some time in some sort of a Buddhist stupa or a yogic retreat or something as we explore. For Westerners, that would be a different cultural practice and a different spiritual practice, or we might find someone from the East coming to explore a Western system of belief or understanding or knowledge. In doing so, we're also going to be immersing ourselves into new cultural ways of doing things, new foods, new lifestyles, new ways of living, and these are going to be very intriguing for us as well. As I mentioned, we might be traveling to foreign corners of the globe in a search for greater wisdom and greater enlightenment that comes under this transit of Jupiter. So all in all, it's a great time for soul growth. It's a time when you're going to be wanting to read more spiritual books, attend more seminars, watch more YouTube lectures, just immersing yourself wherever you can in new philosophies, new ideas. You might, sign up to go to TED Talks or something like that, or go and attend an esoteric church. The world's your oyster in terms of exploring beliefs under this transit, not only because you're going to get more opportunities to do so, but you're going to find that your mind is more open to these things and more receptive to these things than you ever have been before. And remember, Jupiter is the magnetizer. He's going to pull these things into your sphere that you might never have encountered before. That might be a friend who takes you to some new therapeutic dance workshop or something where you have a very spiritual experience, or maybe you have somebody who invites you along to some spiritual discussion group. These kinds of opportunities that don't usually appear on your doorstep may now appear on your doorstep, allowing you to have more experiences of enlightenment and spiritual understanding. Not only that, but you're going to feel more morally upbeat, more idealistic now. Not that this is a particularly idealistic house, the 9th house, but Jupiter brings idealism into the house of beliefs. And of course, we've talked about as within, so without. The change in optimism about your beliefs and your ideals, the morally integrous approach that you're now going to incorporate into your life is going to see external shifts in reality as well. You might get more opportunities, as I've said, to experience spiritual things, or you might have a chance to develop new spiritual approaches or experience new gurus and teachers. It's a time when we're looking for the big philosophical answers to existence. The nature of the ninth house is to be more high-minded and to seek more divine knowledge. And so you're going to be looking for that now. You might have big questions and be looking for big answers, and you will usually receive them under the influence of Jupiter's transit here. This is a time when these light bulb moments can occur in terms of the spiritual truth and substance that we're actually hunting for in life. Ninth house is associated with publishing, and Jupiter also has a very strong affiliation with the ninth house, so he is also connected to ideas of publishing as well. And when these two are combining, the ninth house and Jupiter, you can be very lucky and blessed with publishing opportunities that come your way, and chances to get a story accepted by a publisher, or get an opportunity to publish articles in an online journal or something like that. Opportunities for publishing and literary achievements tend to abound more when Jupiter's in the ninth house. And I've already mentioned that this is a time when you can connect with new mentors, new gurus, new inspirational people in your life. And of course, that can be a lot of fun and very enlightening and enhancing, but there'll be good relationships. Sometimes we come across people who inspire us and then the happiness with them wanes over time. But these people, when they come into your life under Jupiter's transit through the ninth house, are likely to be sources of inspiration in your life for a good deal into the future, for the long term. There might even be some philanthropists among them, or some sort of financial benefactors that have got your back now under this influence also. And if you are already spiritually oriented before this transit, this is a time when the wisdom keepers of the spiritual, associations you align yourself with are going to just boost your spiritual knowledge, your spiritual wisdom, and your experience of spirit and the divine all round. These father figures, they're actually going to be great uplifters of your soul during this time. So do seek out gurus and wisdom keepers. You will be blessed by them under this transit. All round, as I've already said a number of times here already, it's a time when your spiritual life's going to blossom, going to flourish, going to grow. But also can grow your higher knowledge, because that's also represented by the ninth house. You might decide you want to return to university or get a master's degree or do a PhD. Maybe you want to go to university for the first time under this transit. There will be a desire to expand your higher knowledge in traditional ways, such as through university or through more progressive means, depending on the sign through which Jupiter's transiting. But more progressive means might mean doing an online course or doing some sort of webinar or something like that, that allows you to access knowledge that wouldn't have previously been available to you. And I'm not talking about secret, hidden knowledge. We're talking about just higher levels of knowledge that you may never have been exposed to before. This increase in knowledge can also come from the fact that you're seeing life from a big picture perspective now as well, which is in a manner that you mightn't have seen. You might be very detail focused, and when Jupiter goes through the ninth house, suddenly you're seeing the linkages, the synchronicities, the big picture essentially. Your judgments, your opinions, they have a greater perspective to them. In fact, this is a time when you can be really led in the right direction by the divine, working through your perception of the world. It's like the angel that's on your shoulder now is whispering wisdom in your ear that you can attune to support you and guide you in life. And you can trust that intuition. Jupiter is intuition. And you can trust that intuition that's whispering wisdom now when Jupiter transits the ninth house. Essentially, what's happening here is we're getting a balance of spirituality with logical common sense. Now, the ninth house is a very spiritually oriented house in terms of beliefs, cultural practices, religion. But it's also it wants the truth. It wants to seek the divine substance in things, the meaning, the purpose. And with that, combining with a very spiritualized planet of Jupiter, the two energies of the ninth house and Jupiter combining, give you a time of life, a year in your life, because that's how long this transit will roughly last, when you're going to discover great things about spirituality with a logical perspective on them and a realistic perspective on them. It's an integration of the heart and the mind coming together as one. Now, if you're in a business that deals with people from overseas in some capacity, maybe exporting or importing or selling services or something to people from foreign countries, or even in your own country, if you're selling to a neighboring suburb and it's a very different cultural suburb to you, maybe there's a Vietnamese community and you're from the Italian community or something, this is where you can do very, very well this year, because Jupiter allows the exchange of goods and business transactions between foreign cultures to really flourish under this energy. So if you're looking to establish a business that's based in foreign exchanges, then this is the year to do it. I mentioned a moment ago that Jupiter is very intuitive. In fact, when Jupiter's in the ninth house, we can find ourselves being very prophetic. Again, you can trust the angel on your shoulder to make the wise choices, because there's this energy of knowingness about the future. If you think about the archetype of Sagittarius, which has connections to the ninth house, it's the archetype of the centaur firing his arrow off into the distance, looking forward, looking ahead, looking out there. And so there is this energy of prophecy, of looking to the future. What does the future hold? That goes with Sagittarius, ninth house, and Jupiter. So with Jupiter's intuition and the ninth house's connection to looking to the future, we are building for the future now, and there's a prophetic element in this transit that might be present. Trust your gut, trust your intuition about where you're heading and what you're trying to build and achieve and do, because usually Jupiter will not be steering you wrong during this transit. It's a house of inspiration, and you will feel very inspired for the future, inspired to achieve, inspired to build, inspired to grow something that is long-term in nature. Jupiter also rules ceremonies and rituals, and here in the house of religion, it might be a time when you actually enjoy those things, doing, a ceremony at solstice time, or enjoying some sort of family lineage ceremony or recollection during the Day of the Dead, or something that allows you to connect with ceremony, procedure, and ritual in the ninth house, usually to do with spirituality, but it could be almost anything really. But ceremony, rituals, and practices of that nature will be more appealing to you under this transit. Now, in the Hindu system of astrology, when Jupiter is transiting through the ninth house, he's firstly going through the luckiest house according to the Hindu system. The ninth house is considered to be the luckiest house in the chart, and therefore it's going to bring good fortune and success and happiness and blessings. This is particularly pertinent to the South Indian chart, where they believe that to be the case. This also is the house of the father in the Hindu system. And so connections with the father can really benefit and grow and flourish under this influence of Jupiter. It's a time when, if you've got a good relationship with your father, it can be enhanced and blessed. You might also receive from the father. There might be an energy of gainfulness. Jupiter is to gain, and Jupiter represents wealth. So you might gain from a father figure in some way. Jupiter also is aspecting, he's about to go there. Jupiter is aspecting all the other trinal houses, the first house and the fifth house, but also he's aspecting the house opposite it, which is the third house in Hindu. And when we have aspects in Hindu, they are not, in Western astrology, our aspects have either good or bad connotations to them and good or bad effects to them. But in the Hindu system, that's not the case. It's just an aspect. The quality of the aspect is seen by the planet. And in this case, all of these aspects are going to be beneficial because Jupiter is the great benefic. So the aspect to the first house brings good health, good happiness, good bodily state of being, and maybe even some promotions and successes that come as well. The aspect that Jupiter makes to the house opposite at the third house, that's happening and going to help you fulfill your desires in your daily environment. It might give you a chance to learn something new as well. Your siblings might be very blessed, and they might bless you. You might receive something from your siblings, or there could be some enhancement of the relationship that you have with them in some way. The aspect that Jupiter makes to the fifth house, which is the second luckiest house in the Hindu system, means you could fall pregnant during this year. if that's something that you're wanting, or your children might have a big strong influence in your life for good in some manner during this year of your life. There'll be good times to be had with your own children that you already have, and it's a good chance to do some investing as well. Any sort of risky ventures, stock market ventures and so forth can be blessed. You need other good factors in your chart as well, I would add, in your natal chart. But this is a time when this energy can bring some positivity and some blessing to you. Creative expression also can be flourishing under this energy of Jupiter as well, and you can really succeed well in sort of any field of creative expression or hobbies and interests that you might have. So that is what we're seeing with Jupiter's transit through the 9th house and what it can bring us. I hope you enjoyed this little look at what you're in for with a Jupiter transit in the 9th. And do tune in to all the other videos that I've prepared on Jupiter and his transits through the various houses as we go through this 12-year cycle of Jupiter. You're going to experience them all. So check them all out, be prepared, and get ready to enjoy the blessing of Jupiter.